This is Elevation with Chris Oram, where we talk to individuals who've climbed the ladder of success. We'll hear more about their stories, their journeys, and they'll share with us key facts that got them here to this very point today. I have a very, very special guest today. This individual is a top Las Vegas criminal defense attorney, a world traveler, a husband, and a father. But more importantly, he's my father. I welcome to the show my dad, Christopher R. Oram. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
All right, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is your first podcast.
Yes.
What do you think about podcasts?
Well, I haven't watched a lot of podcasts. I have seen just a few, so this is a new experience for me.
Cool. And this is a new experience for me as well. So this is our first show. This is the first episode of Elevation with Chris Oram, and I thought it would be a great idea to get someone who I respect and look up to tremendously on the show to be the first guest. I think it's going to start it off with a bang, and I'm incredibly happy that you agreed to be on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I think we talked about that you love to talk, so I think that we're not going to run out of things to say on this show today. So, Dad, I want to first start off by talking about how I got into this show. So I've been on a couple podcasts before, and the most recent podcast that I've been on was something called Automation Unplugged with Ron Callis. And in our pre-show, he kind of told me, he said, hey man, like, do you have a podcast? You would be a natural at this. Like, this would be something that would be really great for you and it would elevate you. So that's why I started the show Elevation with Chris Oram. And I want to talk to you and start the show off by talking about someone that changed your life, someone that influenced you and a role model. So I want to let the audience know that you kind of grew up as an athlete in high school, right? You wrestled, you played soccer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't really consider yourself an academic.
No, I did very poorly in school. I went to a really, nice school in London, and but unfortunately, I wasn't academically gifted. I wasn't interested in school, but I did gravitate towards the things you described. I played soccer from the time I was very young, and I appeared to excel at that. And I loved wrestling, and I did well at that. And so that was really what my main goal was in life, was to, become a professional footballer or a professional soccer player.
Okay, so your love for soccer in high school got you to go play college soccer. Is that correct?
Yes, I received a scholarship, a soccer scholarship at the University of Denver, where I played and eventually graduated. But I'll tell you, for me, I loved playing soccer from the time I was a small child and played on different teams every year. But when I got to college, it became a job. And by the time I left college, I never played another formal game of soccer ever again after university.
Okay, so I want to talk to you about your time in college, and there's a specific turning point in your life where someone found a gift in you. Someone complimented you in a way that probably influenced your life forever. And correct me, but I believe you were in a debate class or something like that, and I'll let you tell the story because you know it better than I do.
Well, it's not college, Chris. It's actually happened to me as a junior in high school. And I had been in different classes for people who were falling behind. And usually when I was in a class, when the teacher wanted to talk to me, it was going to be the same old thing, maybe we need to get you some tutoring or something along those lines. So I took this speech communication class. And it was the first day of class, and the teacher, who was actually a PhD, had us all get up and say what we did for the summer break. And at the end of the class, he said, Chris, I want to see you. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh, here we go again. First day of school, I'm already doing poorly. And he actually told me, he said, you speak really well, and you should go on and become a speech major. And that shocked me, and I'll always remember it because I had spent so many years of my life and nobody had ever complimented me on anything I'd done academically. So the fact that I had somebody telling me that maybe I could excel and sort of picking me out of the class not only helped my confidence, but I listened, and it wasn't hard because nobody else was giving me compliments about anything I was doing academically.
Okay, so that was a key point in your life, would you say that's a top memory when someone kind of influenced you and maybe inspired you to follow a career in public speaking and kind of got you to where you are today in your career?
Yes, I think that's accurate. I then went on to university, and I was in a speech class there my first year. And again, the same thing happened. The speech teacher said, "You're pretty talented at this," and so I guess I was clever enough in life to recognize that maybe I should follow what elder people, elder advisors were telling me. And so I really listened to what those two educators told me, and I followed it.
All right. So you go to the University of Denver, you take your classes there, and then you eventually go to law school.
Not eventually. Right after I graduate
Okay.
university, I am in the process of applying to law school, and I'm accepted at Loyola School of Law in New Orleans. And so right after university, I attend law school.
Did you always know you wanted to be a lawyer?
No, no, I had no idea. Again, I wasn't academically gifted, so I heard that everybody said my brother would be a good lawyer. He never became a lawyer, but I was actually two things happened to me in university. I was talking to this guidance counselor, and she'd gotten to know me, and she's a middle-aged lady who told me, she said, "I don't think there's anybody who's more logical and wants to argue as much as you." And I thought it was odd. I liked her very much, but she said, "You should become a lawyer," which I thought was a very peculiar statement. I forgot about it. And then one day I was partying with my friend as a junior in college, and I mean, we were partying, and he said, "You're about the most argumentative person I've ever met. You should become a lawyer." And I thought that was odd. And that night, I decided I'd be a lawyer. I called my mother, and I told her I'm going to be a lawyer, and she just thought it was crazy because I'd never mentioned it. But from that day on, which still sounds peculiar to me, why it changed my direction, I never looked back. Never.
So that was the turning point.
That was the point where I realized I'm going to be a lawyer. The unfortunate thing is when you spent a lifetime thinking you're going to be a professional soccer player and you really haven't put much effort into academics, then getting into law school and having to compete with really intelligent people is sort of difficult.
Right. So going back, you weren't a big reader, but now I know you read tons of law transcripts per day. Like you read a lot.
Yes, I read a lot, and you are right. I couldn't stand to read when I was young. I couldn't stand to sit still. In fact, and I'm sure a lot of people have this, I'd read a page and not remember what I read. I couldn't concentrate on the material, nor was I interested in this material. But I love what I do, and now I write a lot of appeals. I write a lot of post-convictions along with many, many murder trials that I've done. And so I can read hundreds and hundreds of pages every day. Yes.
Okay.
I do.
So let's transition over to your career now. So you're a criminal defense attorney.
That's correct.
So on the surface, what does that mean in a nutshell?
That means I defend people who are accused of serious crime, and I defend people that many people in the state of Nevada that they want to execute. I have, since the time I was in my 20s, have been in trials defending people they want to execute, and that is a big majority of what I've done throughout my career is capital murder cases, and I think I'm at about close to 50 murder trials, half of which were death penalty trials. And I love doing this kind of work. It's very challenging. You're on the hard side of it because, a lot of times society hates your client. You're walking in a courtroom where most people are hoping you're going to lose. The vast majority of people are hoping they're going to lose and that they're going to, execute this man or woman.
Gotcha. So when you have to learn more about the case and speak with the individuals, what was startling to me as a young man, and even now I would say is quite frightening, is that you have to be in a room with these individuals. And it's not just a room, I guess. Talk to me about that. You get locked in a room with people that are accused of terrible things.
Yes. Yes. And From the outside, it does sound scary. I go to the Clark County Detention Center and I go up, go through all this sort of security, and then I go into a room and they bring the inmate in and they lock us in there. There's a button, and you can push the button and it'll take them 5, 10, 15 minutes to get back and take you out of there. I see it as I'm dealing with individuals, and I think there's a certain amount of skill in how you deal with certain types of people. A lot of the people I'm dealing with are hardened, very, very hardened people. And so I think there are certain techniques that I utilize. There are many techniques that I utilize to control that situation because, I like you say, I'm locked in a room, and a lot of times those people are frustrated, they're angry, they're in jail, they want out, and, there are times that they express that. And there have been a few occasions that can be nerve-wracking.
Does it, like, the first time you did that, what was your thought process?
No, there's nothing remarkable about it. I don't remember anything remarkable about the first time. Like I remember I went in there. No, because one of the things that I really practice, and I think any criminal defense attorney should practice, is non-judgment upon your client. If you go in there and you've read in the newspaper, this horrific, let's say, set of murders that have happened, if you go in there and they can see in your eyes that you're pronouncing judgment, then you're no different than everybody else blaming them. You're there to help them. Mm-hmm. And you need to, you really need to give them that energy that I'm here to help. I'm not here to make judgments. I'm not here to, put you down or, sit there. Maybe the police said things when they were making the arrest that, and the newspapers making comments about them. News is making comments. Other inmates are making comments. I'm there to come and let them know I'm here to help you. And if you utilize these type of techniques, you don't show judgment, then it can be very helpful. But there are also a lot of other techniques that you need to use in those situations.
How long have you been doing that?
Since 1991 here in the state of Nevada. So what is that, about 33 years?
And while I thought of it, this wasn't going to be a topic. What did your dad say when you first passed the bar? He said something maybe that caught you as disrespectful. He thought maybe you should be a law clerk or something like that.
It was actually worse than that. I had tremendous respect for my father when he was alive. Tremendous respect for this man, and it did make me sad. I came out of law school and I came to Las Vegas. I didn't know anybody and I was struggling to find a job. I only had a few job interviews and they'd ask me how many trials I'd done, and I'm like, well, I'm right out of law school. And coming home from a few of the jobs where I didn't get it, my father suggested that maybe I should be a legal assistant. And it was, I owed law loans, I had a lot of money, and I put a lot of effort into this, and I worked really hard to pass the bar, and that was sort of a dispiriting moment. But I believe that in adversity, you've got to overcome it. You've got to fight. The wrestler in me is I'm gonna fight through that, and I'm gonna win.
So talk about mindset. Did you believe in yourself throughout the entire process? Did you have points where you didn't know if I could do this? Maybe I'm not good at this. Like maybe some defeats in the courtroom, it's like, hey, like maybe this isn't right for me.
I think the most fear came when I was a first-year law student, and I realized that a lot of the people I was around were really academics. And these people had gotten 4.0s and great scores on the law school admissions test. And I was now competing with these people, and I was frightened that I may not make it, which obviously didn't happen. I just persevered. I was sort of the middle of the class, maybe just slightly below. And so those were fears of mine, were the academic parts. But I distinctly remember a comment from another law student who had pointed out that he was very high up in the class and I was much lower. And I was kind of agitated. He was an older guy and I was agitated. And so when he was done telling me how great his scores were and how poor or, mediocre mine was, I told him, well, when we get into a courtroom, you won't be able to, handle somebody like me. I'm just going to be so far above you. And it just infuriated him. So I believed in myself then, and I believe I was right. And I also, would tell you something. Don't talk smack. The guy was talking smack, talking a whole bunch of smack for no reason. I wasn't being a perfect gentleman. And so he got something that he probably didn't like. And if he, Google's life right now, he'd figure out, well, the guy was right.
Very interesting. I think it's an incredible career path. It's very unique. It's very interesting. I don't think it's meant for everyone, but I think it's a perfect fit for you.
Yes, I don't think this is good for many people. I can see in their faces when I have to describe some of the murder cases, how severe they are, how the victims have been harmed, that it's very difficult for people to understand how I do it, how I represent so many people, because I represented hundreds and hundreds. I don't want to say 1,000 because I'm quite sure it's less than that, but that's the number of first degree murder cases I've handled here in the state of Nevada. And so I think a lot of people are disturbed by that. I don't care. I love what I do.
That's super interesting. I'm real glad that we got to touch on that subject. So I got a couple more subjects here that I have lined up for us today. I want to talk about in the world of elevation. We talk about leveling up in all aspects of life. So whether that's in business, your career, in relationships, specifically, I'd like to bring it to the health topic now. So going back 20 years ago, you probably didn't have very many healthy habits, right? You smoked, you probably ate a little bit, whatever you want, just overall not good habits. And I want to know what changed and at what point you turned to fitness as sort of an outlet for your life.
Okay, so that is, I find an interesting question. I came out, I played soccer, I had been in shape my whole life, and then I became a lawyer, and I decided, I'm going to, be this, I wanted to be a top criminal defense lawyer. So I just threw myself into it. I dedicated myself. I also picked up some miserable habits. I smoked 20 cigarettes a day, and I realized my eating habits probably weren't particularly great. But it didn't matter to me because I always knew that I was a former soccer player, and that's what that's what I thought. I thought, okay, well, in my mind, I'm still in shape. I'm still this athlete. And every year or two, I'd go into my garage and I'd lift some weights like I was an athlete. I get the bench press out, put the 44s on there, 45s, and I do this. I don't know what I was doing, but I quit every 6 weeks. That's what I do. I do it for 6 weeks and I quit, like so many people do. And maybe 10 years into the game, my mother made some comments to me. She said, I've been watching you, and I've noticed your clothing. I taught you to dress nicely. Yet I noticed that you have holes in the bottom of your shoes sometimes. Your shirts look scruffy, and I'm shocked. And she said, you were an athlete, but now look at you. I began to debate with her. Oh, no, I'm still. And she said, no, you're a smoker. And she commented that I would have thought you wear French cuffs, which I was like, what on earth are you saying to me? And she said, I thought you'd travel the world because that's what you were raised doing. But here, all you do is concentrate on your cases, and then you're just going to die doing this. And I remember thinking that was a terrible thing, but it didn't really faze me, other than it was in my memory banks. And when I lost my mother, that was a really painful time for me. I stopped smoking. I remember I stopped smoking, and one of the things I did is I started to lift weights, but I did it differently. This time I didn't go out there. I went out to my garage. I took the 44. I have 44s. I know most people have 45s, and I took them off. And I thought, you're weak. You're a very weak man physically. So you're going to learn from your core, and you're going to do something about this, and you're going to stop this smoking. And so I did. And a client of mine gave me this book called The Truth by Frank Seppi, and he said, follow this. And I did. And I have followed Frank Seppi's book religiously. I'm sure if he could hear this, he may have a dispute about whether I'm following it. But at my age, I'm doing a pretty good job lifting those weights all the time. I love what I learned from him, And as you can see today, the other thing I did when my mom died is I went out and got a whole bunch of cufflinks, got some French cuff shirts, and made sure that I wore them and that I had nice clothing. And so I started traveling the world and following the advice that my mother had told me and what I learned.
You got some great French cufflinks on today,
I
correct?
do, yeah. I sure do. And I wear them, and anybody ever comments on them, I always think to myself, my mother would be proud.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So you're a man of your word in that sense, but you also have to teach people to become a man of their word. Talk to me about being a man of your word and what that is, and how you, as my father, can teach me that lesson and have taught me that lesson, that your word is everything.
I'm a young lawyer, and I only worked for a law firm for 2 years before I started my own. And this marketer came to me and said, "What is it you want to be known for?" And I said, "One of the things I want is my word to be golden. I don't want people to distrust me. I want people to listen to me and just believe what I say is true." And one thing I have been very pleased with over the last few decades is when I tell a prosecutor something, I don't usually get a confirming letter. We've called off the preliminary hearing. I want to confirm. I feel like I have built this reputation that if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I suppose one of the best, a compliment that I remember from a top prosecutor here is he told the Supreme Court, that he woke up in an argument in the Supreme Court. He said, "I have woken up in the morning and gone to bed at night angry with Mr. Oram. In many of these trials, he has irritated me, but he won't lie to you outside of that court." And when I heard that, I wasn't even arguing against him. I heard this on a recording, and I was like, wow, that's what I wanted. I want people to believe me when I say it. If I tell you I will be there, I will be there. It's important, I think, as an attorney, and it's important that you keep your word to clients.
One of my...
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah.
I was in a capital trial, and I had told my client I would see him, I think, over the weekend. And on Monday morning, he complained to me. He said, "You told me you'd come," and I had told him. And rather than make excuses, I just told him I had been busy. I had told him something that wasn't accurate. I apologized to him. And I think over the next few days, I apologized to him multiple times, saying it's bothering me that I had said that to you, and I didn't do it. And so, I keep your word, so you don't have to apologize or lie to people, keep your word.
One of my favorite guiding quotes is something that goes kind of along the lines of, if a man is right, his world will be right. So when you do the right thing, you keep your word to people, you're going to have an easy life. You're not going to struggle because, I told a lie, I broke a promise. So keeping your word, I think, is one of the best guiding principles that you can have.
Well, I think, it's not going to make your life easy. Okay. It's not going to make your life. It doesn't make my life easy. I have a stressful life. That may not be accurate. But what another quote that I would say is, the truth doesn't change. And so if you always tell the truth, it becomes easy. If you're lying a lot, you're having to keep up with your lies. And I see that with clients all the time. They talk to the police, and now I'm dealing with a pack of lies that they shouldn't have said because now I'm having to deal with it. And so to me, it has made my life more comfortable, my personal life, my professional life, that I have people who make statements about me that I can take your word to the bank.
That's great. So you talk about your life being kind of stressful. I imagine that work stresses you out a lot.
It's tremendous stress.
What do you do to escape from that? I know you love to travel the world, and you're a world traveler.
Yes, again, my mother had made the comment, and so I think in 1995, I pull a map of the world out, and I decide I'm just going to go every 4 to 6 months, and I'm going to go someplace different in the world. So the first place I see is Tahiti, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to go there. That's what I did. And the second place was Hong Kong and Beijing, and I went there. And every 6 months after that, I chose a different place on the map of the world. I wouldn't repeat. And so I went to so many countries over the last 30 years, and it's a lot of stress relief for me. even though you're only gone maybe for 10 days, it's my hobby to plan these things out. I like to look at the airfare and the hotels, and I take my time, and it's all part of the fun for me. And so that's a stress relief. The lifting weights I've always enjoyed, and but there's a lot of stress connected to it.
I'm sure. So on the point of travel, let's talk about different destinations. You can go to a beach destination, a city destination, and I don't want to ask the traditional question, oh, what's your favorite place to go to? Like, what spot should everyone check out? So talk to me about some of the highlights. I can highlight one of my favorite trips that we went on together, and I think you already know what I'm going to say. It's when we went to 5 different Oberoi hotels in India, and we had a full-on different experience at each one of them.
Yeah, I thought the Oberoi hotels in India were just absolutely beautiful. You were, I think about 12. No, you were less than that, because I think about 11 or 12 at the time. And I took you, and yeah, you're right. I took you a lot of different places. I wanted you to see the world. Highlights, when you say highlights, I think the world is a beautiful place. And rather than say the places I really like, almost all of them I really liked. There was something about them. But I think what's more important about the travel is someplace I put down. And I think sometimes you learn from your mistakes. And I made a comment about a place, and I said that it was, I made a disparaging comment about it. And I won't say where it was, but I didn't like it. And I was driving, somebody else was driving, and around this area, and I saw a farm off in the distance, like a corn farm, and I could see the farmhouse way off in the distance. And the sun was setting, and the sun was so large. It was just huge as it was going down and setting. And I saw the farmer out there, and I thought, God, I bet he thinks that's beautiful. I bet he thinks that's the most beautiful thing in the world. Yet here I was, a young man, insulting it, disparaging this place that I would think was just gorgeous to him and his family. And it taught me the lesson, don't put places down. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean that it isn't somebody else's heaven. Okay. And so I think rather than say, okay, I really liked Tahiti, I really liked, going to Prague, these are all true. I loved safari. I did so many things that I can sit here and go on about. But I think the lesson that I would say is, if you find a place and you don't like it, remember that's somebody's home. Somebody may love it for many reasons. Just be careful how you talk about our world we live in.
I absolutely agree. And when I was in Madrid on my study abroad session, I took a class called Intercultural Communications, where we learned all about culture, and we learned to respect different cultures. So kind of like what you're saying, just because something is what many people may call odd or weird or different, it's just different than what you expect. And everyone has different cultural dimensions in which they operate in their society. So the American culture is far different than the European culture. Not necessarily one's better than the other, but they're different, and they have different values and different moral beliefs. And at the end of the day, we're all human beings. So when you go to these places and you get to interact with the people, that's one of the best parts of travel, and I think you'd agree with that.
Yes, I think just meeting different humans, seeing different types of culture it really is a wonderful thing. I recall a time when you're saying different cultures. I had playing a game at the University of Denver against a university, and it was in the Midwest, and I found it was a very contentious game, and it was actually turning into violence. And I remember I had said something to the referee that I felt that FIFA rules mandate that they should send the guy off. And another player, a local player, came up and started making fun of me, going, "Oh, FIFA rules. Oh, wait, what are you talking about? Where are you from?" And I was really angered by it. I thought, this guy's so ignorant. He didn't even know what I meant by FIFA, which is the governing body for soccer. And again, I thought it's a real interesting situation. I thought he was very ignorant. And in my mind, I was putting him down, where he came from down, in my mind. And again, realization. People are from different places. And he was probably a really nice person off that soccer field. He probably cared about what he was doing. This had gotten really heated. And so I think travel is a wonderful thing, trying to open your mind to people that are different. And if he heard this broadcast, maybe he think I should have opened my mind to him too. Open your mind to people.
Would you recommend everyone travel?
Okay, so I think that's a sensitive subject, and here's what I mean. In law school, I put myself through school. I mean, a lot of people would see how I lived. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have curtains on up. I had $5 a day to eat. And I was sleeping on a mattress that the landlord had given me from in the basement, and there were nasty stains all over this thing, and I was poor, okay? Not in my mind. I was a rich man in my mind because I was going to do things, and I knew I would get somewhere, and I'd always look at my law books. From school, I would line them up in the best way I could, and I was proud of them, and I knew I was going to go places. So the lack of money was hard, and I remember there were embarrassing moments. You know, you're a young man, and you can't go on a date because you don't have any money. I can't drive anybody anywhere. So before I say, yeah, everybody should travel, it's never been lost on me that there'd be people being like, I'd love to, but I can barely feed my children. And, you know, you're talking like, oh, you should go to tea. I can't afford to do this. So if you can travel and you have the means to travel, I would highly recommend it. But I also recognize that there are people that may not be able to afford it. And I would also make a statement that I have seen people that I know put Facebook where they show, you know, the beautiful airlines they're taking and the beautiful hotels. And I think, well, you know, there are a lot of people can't afford those things, and you may be hurting people's feelings. So I tend to make sure that, you know, I don't want people's feelings to be hurt. I want to be sensitive to others. And but I guess I haven't really answered your question. If you can afford to travel, travel. It is eye-opening, and the world is a wonderful place, and you only have one life to live, so why not see some of the world?
So I want to touch on something you said that, you know, people are showing off on Facebook, they're showing off on the internet, they're flexing. So a lot of people will try and work their way up the ladder of success and then just flex on everybody. And I think you don't do that at your current point in life, right? We'll talk about how you live a good life. You're very comfortable. You have a nice car, a nice home, but you don't need to flex to anybody. But at some point in your life, you were flexing. Talk to me about what you call a big regret in your life, and essentially, I guess, a money decision that maybe wasn't the most rational at the time.
You know, so I've told you that I had years of basically not having any money, okay? You have $5 a day to eat. That can be kind of hard. I'm the guy, you know, I never make fun of people when they wheel shopping carts down the street, okay? Because that was me. I didn't have a car, and so I don't try never to look down on anybody, okay? What happens is, what happened to me was at some point I, you know, made a little money. You make a little money as a lawyer, and I didn't have a car, so now I wanted a beautiful car, and you know, Porsches are beautiful cars. And
what type of Porsche?
A Carrera. I drove a couple Carreras, a silver one and then a red one, and you know, look, I was a much younger man. I'm driving around in Porsches. I enjoyed it. I loved Porsches from the time I was young. I grew up in downtown London. They're everywhere, and I always wanted one, so I went out and got one. As I look back on that, do I understand what I was trying to do? Yeah, I was having fun. I wasn't just doing it for other people. I really loved driving the Porsche. It was like a glove. These things were amazing.
Yeah.
The finance of it, you know, you're chucking away a lot of money doing that. And I have to reconcile that with a man who spent years in law school with $5 a day to eat, and now I'm utilizing that. I wouldn't take it back. But I don't think the Porsches were wise financial decisions. Okay, and so I suppose if you want to say flexing, I wasn't flexing for anybody. But did I realize that was those were nice cars? Yes. And did I feel bad? I really felt bad in the red Porsche the market went down. The housing market started to go down, I think 2007. And I remember I'm at a red light and I'm thinking to myself, damn, I got all these people around me. They're losing their houses and I'm driving this car. And it made me feel bad. I felt bad and I didn't want it anymore. So I got conservative vehicles and continued to drive nice conservative vehicles. But, that's a financial decision that I regret.
So at our most recent breakfast, you talked about how you're always scraping together every penny to go to the store, right? It's not the Gucci store, it's not the Versace store, it's the savings store. And I want you to touch a little bit on your psychology of money and what you put your money into in the savings store. What is the savings store? What sort of stocks are you investing in? Things like that.
All right. Well, I probably a little private about finances. However, I will tell you that you need to be careful in life, or I felt like I needed to be careful. I really came from a philosophy, Chris, that if anybody was going to be thrown out and on the sidewalk in life, it would be me. And I have that today, that I have to work twice as hard as everybody else, be very aggressive, work harder than everybody else so I don't get thrown out on the street. Subsequently, I wanted to make sure that, I didn't just take my money and throw it away. And I think the easiest thing I would see is there was a show that I watched here in Las Vegas, and it was based on these young footballers in England, young soccer players, and they were hoping to get professional contracts. And I remember thinking at the time as I was watching this series, it was really sort of like a soap opera, but it was really cool. And I remember thinking to myself that I wonder if one of these players, I don't know if the audience doesn't know football very well, but if one of these players comes from being a schoolboy trainee, gets a professional contract for Manchester United or, Arsenal or some bigger team, if what they did was they just stayed in their same lifestyle. Can you imagine? They're like, okay, I'm going to live in the dorm here at Manchester United if they have them, and I'm going to drive I'm going to drive a Toyota Corolla, and I'm not going to go, out to the clubs. Every penny that I have, first thing I'm going to do is pay the tax person, and the rest of it I'm going to put away. And if they had that philosophy, and I think that goes through all sports, can you imagine how wealthy these young men and women would be? Yet I hear stories all the time. I think I watched this documentary about how there are so many athletes that 4 or 5 years after their careers are over, they're penniless. Why? Because they handled their money very poorly. They flexed. They made it rain. And they probably thought all they'd ever heard their whole life is what a great soccer player, football player, basketball player. They're just great. And they're going to live forever. They're going to play forever. And they got a knee injury, and 3 years later, the $1 million contract is over. And what are they going to do now? And if instead, they had done it backward. In other words, as you get older in life, maybe, you take a person that's in their late 50s, they're going to start worrying about retirement. If that was the mindset of an 18-year-old super athlete, imagine how wealthy they would be. So rather than talk about where I put money, I think if I could say it right, if I could take my mind and put it in a young athlete, I would tell that athlete, put that money in the bank at a minimum. Buy a reasonable house, see if you can buy it outright. Okay, have some place to have for the rest of your life. There are other things, I think most economists would say, look at the S&P 500 since the Great Depression, it's made about 11%. These seem like reasonable investments along with real estate. And I think more people should concentrate on that aspect of it rather than flexing.
So you wouldn't recommend someone buy 9 outdoor TVs for their home?
Yes, I think if you have 9 outdoor TVs and you learn to make it rain, you'll soon find out that a fool and their money are soon parted. And so I'm being facetious, but that's what I think. 9 outdoor TVs, you got the money to pay for it. I hope you have the money the rest of your life. But if you don't, you may remember those 9 TVs and think, damn, I could have put some of that on,
For sure. So the industry I work in, I work in the top 1% of clients in Las Vegas that have beautiful homes, multi-million dollar homes. And I think it's funny that my dad is almost the anti-technology person in the home. He doesn't want any of that nonsense. He doesn't want automated shades. He doesn't want a control system that can play distributed audio throughout the whole home. And that's my entire life. That's what I spend a majority of my life doing. So the standard now is to have in-ceiling speakers. And we talk about that and you're like, I don't want that ruining my drywall, things like that. Like, I feel like you're the number one person that is against that type of lifestyle. And it's just like funny how I can be working in that and you can be just so against it. Like, I think it's cool. Maybe not 9 TVs, but I see the benefit of it. And you don't want any of that nonsense.
No, and the TV behind us right here, I have one TV at home and it is 44 inches. So I think that's bigger. I just got it a little while ago because my last TV, went on the broke. But I tell you, here is where I came up with that. So I'm in university. I worked for the summer in university and I acquired this money. And I don't know if anybody listening to this knows what Bang & Olufsen is, but at the time that's like the top stereo manufacturer. So I spent in 1985 $1,500 on a Bang & Olufsen stereo. $1,500. By the end of college, I remember the speakers don't work. I'm giving it away. $1,500. Okay. And so I learned that music is great. And, I love going to concerts when I was young and I like good music, but that was a waste. And I don't want to do that anymore. And I'm old enough to know that, technology for me will go out of style. It will be outdated. And so the speakers up in the ceiling, you're going to have to get new ones. You're going to have somebody up there. And, I just look at it as a Bang & Olufsen, and I'm not going to waste the money on it.
I think it's just super interesting how that's kind of your philosophy. And I don't think that the masses have that philosophy. I don't think all the attorneys that you surround yourself with, maybe not closely, but in the area where you work every day, I think that these people probably try and have the most expensive stereo. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I think a lot of people, for whatever reason, maybe they like TVs, they like the technology. For each person, let them have their opinions. I don't mind. For me, I wonder, if you come from the philosophy that you could be on the street in no time, that will make you start to say, make sure that I'll be ready for that and I'll be safe from that and I'll have something to fall back on. I can't fall back on an 85-inch TV, okay? And I don't think anybody's going to buy it, for very much. So to me, I wanted some type of security in life. And I felt that wouldn't come by buying $1,500 Bang & Olufsen stereos when you're in university. It's just not for me. So along with I made the same mistake. I wanted a Porsche, and I wanted Porsches, and that's what I did.
All right. So I want to talk about now. Sometimes I've bought you gifts in the past. So I bought you a couple books in your lifetime. Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, Principles, Ray Dalio. But it wasn't until maybe about a year ago that I recommended you this book. And for some reason, you decided to listen to it on the audiobook, and you really have never stopped since.
No, it's called Interview with the Devil from Napoleon Hill. And you told me about it, and I listen to it all the time when I'm driving to work. I just find it a remarkable book. The man, Napoleon Hill, wrote it, I believe, 1938, but they wouldn't publish it because they were so nervous about the damage it would do to him. And so I think it was published in 2011, and I understand it. A lot of it's an attack upon
society,
the education system, and established religions. And so I think there was a lot of fear of the retaliation or the backlash against him. But it's a fascinating book on the philosophy of life, and I really enjoy it.
So if you guys haven't listened to Outwitting the Devil, it's a great audiobook. It's done as a series of interviews with Napoleon Hill and the devil, and there's a lot of great insight that you can learn from it. I would recommend it. I'm sure my dad would recommend it as well. But It's an absolute killer book. And then some books that I've given you, like The Power of Now, it was kind of woo-woo, like you didn't get into it.
Yeah, I read a little bit of it and put it down. The only one that grabbed me was Napoleon Hill. And Chris, I'm not a big, I got to read all day long. I got to read my murder cases all day long. And so the idea of coming home and then cracking open a book is just not going to happen. In fact, I didn't actually read The Interview with the Devil. I listened to it, as I go to work. I just can't conceive that I'm going to sit there and read a book. It's not going to happen.
So I would like you to give us some actionable advice for the people listening to this show. If you're looking to elevate in your life, let's say you're an 18-year-old man or woman, and you're just sort of entering your adult life. What are some tips or tricks that you would recommend for people that want to succeed in life? They want to elevate in life. So we talked about fitness. That's a key point. How would you recommend elevating in the world of business and what people are passionate about?
I think there's a number of ways. I am around very successful attorneys, okay? I'm surrounded by successful people. I'm also surrounded by people who a lot of them have thrown their lives away, their freedom away. The tips that I would give to young people, don't come with an idea of getting rich quick, unless you're an athlete, in which case, save that money, okay? Try to go slow. Try to learn a craft and be patient. Be courteous to human beings. Be fair to others, because I think law of compensation is a very important concept. Go out and do the very best you can. When you fall and you have erred and you feel you cannot succeed, get back up and continue to fight. Don't give up, and look at it for the long term. If you slowly try to save your money, if you slowly try to pay off your house, if you do this in a cautious way, and you're conscientious about what you're doing, I think that if you really, really love what you do, you care about what you do, you treat people with respect, and you're courteous and careful with your funds, that in the long run, you will succeed. But you got to be dedicated. And when I say you need to treat people with respect, if you're an employee, get to work on time. Mm-hmm. Treat your coworkers with respect. Talk with respect to people, okay? Make sure that if you feel you're above somebody, you think you're the surgeon, okay, maybe in this, don't forget that the person sweeping the floor has feelings. And they're a human being too, and they may be a wonderful human being. Don't forget about them. Don't get too elevated in your mind, right? Be down to earth, and really treat people well. And I would think that is probably what I would suggest is a form of success and elevation. And if you've done it that way, you'll be a self-respecting person. Like one thing I always wanted, Chris, is that when I look in the mirror, I don't want to feel bad about myself. I don't want to think I cheated somebody, I didn't take care of somebody, I told the client I'd see him and I didn't see him. I don't want that. So keep your word and try to be self-respecting.
If a man is right, his world will be right.
I suppose.
One thing that I really admire about you, and maybe you didn't touch on it just now, is that you always show up. You show up every single day. When you're sick, you still put your shoes on and go to work every day, because I think maybe that it's not just about how you feel and, I don't feel good today, so I'm just going to not show up.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a reality of my life. Mm-hmm. There's court on a particular day. When I was a young lawyer, I go to court 4 or 5 times a day. And I remember I never missed work. And this one time I feel sick, but you got to go. And so my office is right downtown by the court. So I walk out my back alley. I'm walking to the court, and I realize, I think I'm going to throw up. So I get to a tree right by the DA's, district attorney's office. Sure as heck, I just start throwing up. And I remember grabbing onto the tree, looking at the court, going, I've got to go in. And I thought, I don't think so. I think this is the one day I could call the court and say, I just don't think I'm throwing up. And I think as I look back at the story, it was a tribute to my dedication. I've got to be there for the client. I can't call in sick. I can't. I've got to go. And I also, you shouldn't go places where you are sick. And before COVID, well before that, when I was a young lawyer, I remember I was sweating one time from my head and realized I had a terrible fever. And, that's not good, obviously, because you could contaminate others. But it was a dedication. Get to work, get there on time, help people.
Awesome. So we're getting near the end of our time. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we kind of wrap this up?
No, I mean, I think you've asked me the questions you thought we were going to go over. I wish, I would always hope, I think I always hope, whether it's with clients or whether it's in a trial, that I've said something or done something that helped somebody, that gave them some ideas, like Dr. Wyant, who told me, you'd be a good public speaker. You should do that. My wrestling coach, Jim McGovern, I dreamt about the guy until I was in my 40s. He was so inspiring to me. I wanted to win so badly for the coach. And so I always hope that you can leave these sort of, pieces of you behind that will help others, that will give them some type of inspiration. And so if anybody's listening to this or listen to this, I hope that something I've said is helpful to people.
And I don't think you can tell people how to live their lives, but I think in this show we left some clues on where you can look to be successful, character traits that you can have to embody, to elevate and be the best version of yourself. I always talk about being the 10.0 version of yourself. And, just before we got on this show, I was talking about how you should become better than the person you were yesterday. And I think that's basically what the show Elevation is about, becoming a better version of yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a good concept. Always fight to get better. You can always get better. And I do. I really feel like I get better because I'm open to different ideas. I'm open to learning, and I really try to do that every day and learn from my errors. I think it's a very important thing to do. Take a hard look at yourself, and accept responsibility for the things you've done. It would be another thing I would tell you, if you've wronged somebody and you know it, even if it's years later, either tell it to yourself and make sure it doesn't happen again, or let the person know, 10 years down the road, I regret what I did. I've done that a few times, and I've never regretted it. It's helped me, heal from mistakes that I've made.
I use regret in my life as a guideline. So maybe after every day I debrief and say, hey, what did I regret about today? And I try and not do that tomorrow. I try and learn from my mistakes and my regret. I know you always taught me something when I was growing up. It's like, if you have to make the mistake yourself, learn from that mistake. But the smartest people can learn from the mistakes of others.
Yes, that's true. They're only the smartest people.
Yeah.
It's easy.
It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard to, it's like we're talking about with professional athletes, right? You can look at them, and other younger men and women that are going to become professional athletes should look at them. Look at a person like, unfortunately, I saw Boris Becker. He was a big tennis star when I was young, amazing, and they put him in a penitentiary for some type of, I think it's bankruptcy fraud, although I could have that slightly wrong. But I mean, look at the errors the man made. He threw away all this prize money and was left in a prison cell. I'm like, that just is remarkable to me. He should have learned, and others should learn from him.
Right. All right, cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
It was my pleasure.
You enjoy your first podcast?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting.
I thought it was a great one. So this is Elevation with Chris Oram, where we speak to individuals who've climbed the ladder of success. This was episode 1, most importantly, with my dad. You want to be a future guest on the show?
Sure, anytime.
We'll make it happen. So thank you guys so much for watching today. Like, comment, subscribe to the podcast. You can find more about us at chrisoram.com. And we got a lot more action coming very, very soon. So weekly episodes coming here. Elevation with Chris Oram. This has been episode 1. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you for having me.